Thank you, Chair. We are live on YouTube and the meeting is being recorded, so I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual licensing and enforcement subcommittee on the 21st of April. I'm your chair, Councillor Joe Wibley, and I'd also like to welcome anybody watching the meeting via the live stream. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded, so please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind council members that the code of conduct applies throughout this meeting, and we reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. As this licensing and enforcement subcommittee meeting is dependent on an internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or a power cut, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. And if we're not able to reconnect after 15 minutes, we'll consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. And please check the committee page on our website if that happens. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting, and anybody else can view the agenda by visiting the website at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. It's in the interest of all parties present that the virtual meeting runs in an orderly manner, so could you please bear in mind the following points throughout. If you could make sure that all phones are turned off and are on silent, and make sure all microphones are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. There's a lot of us here today. That would be really useful. The meeting is being streamed on YouTube, but please do not have the YouTube streaming on at the same time as viewing it on your iPad, because there will be about a 30-second delay and you won't be able to hear or respond to anything if you're doing that. And it will create horrible loopy feedback. We don't really want that. When making your points, please focus on the 4 licensing objectives and they are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. And while we welcome people making their representations, any other points that are not relevant to those 4 licensing principles will be disregarded by the subcommittee. Keep points short and do not repeat points that have already been made, and do not interrupt other speakers. As the chair of the meeting, I will advise when it is the turn of the applicant, the responsible authority, and the interested parties to speak. There are a number of interested parties in the meeting, so when you are advised, please raise your electronic hand to indicate that you wish to speak. You'll then be called in turn by name. You'll be delighted to hear we have some comfort breaks built into the day. There'll be one at around 11 o'clock for 10 minutes, half an hour at 12:45. If we're still here at 3, there'll be 10 minutes there. And today's hearing will conclude at 4:30, whether we're finished or not, for reasons that, so we will be finishing at 4:30 today. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of subcommittee members here present. Councillors, can you unmute your microphone? And when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you've confirmed you're present, please mute your microphone again.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bloxham.
Present.
Councillor Chapman.
Present.
And Councillor Wibley.
I am present.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 24th of February. If anyone has a comment on the last set of minutes held on the 24th of February, could you comment by raising your electronic hand? And if there are none, I will take this as an indication that we agree those minutes. Okay, those minutes are agreed, and I'd just like to thank Councillor Bloxham and those who attended that meeting for doing so, as I was unable to. So thank you very much for that. Agenda item 2, apologies. We're all here, so I don't think we have any apologies, do we?
No,
No.
no apologies.
Okay. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. So we'll do a roll call for any declarations, which Sarah will do. And we will also, so Sarah, if you could do that for us, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And councillors, if you could please confirm any declarations of interest, including a confirmation that you're not biased or predetermined. Councillor Bloxham.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you. I have a personal interest as one of the objectors. Mr. David Buller is known to me as he was a previous neighbour when I lived in Exmouth. Obviously, also Councillor Ollie Davey is known to me as an East Devon District Councillor. I can confirm that I'm able to determine the above application free from bias or predetermination. I've also received a number of lobbying emails regarding this application, to which I've merely acknowledged receipt of the email. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Good morning, Sarah. Councillor Maddie Chapman, Town Councillor as well as District Councillor. I am a friend of Mary Nash, whose husband was a colleague of mine. I know quite a few of the applicants. I have had emails and correspondence, but I am free of bias and predetermination on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. And Councillor Whibley.
Yeah, I am an Exmouth Town Councillor. I do know several of the interested parties through various council activities since being a councillor. However, I have received lobbying emails which I have responded to in a manner which suggests it's not something that I'm able to have those conversations at that point, and I am free of predetermination and bias and am able to determine this case, I think.
Thank you, and that concludes the declarations. So back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. There are no matters of urgency to discuss. There are no confidential items. So I will introduce item 6, which is why we're all here, the application for premises licence. There will be a lot of me talking now. I do apologise. I'd like to welcome the applicant, Mayor Beach Limited, represented by Mr. Gareth Pinwell. Welcome. He is from Ashford Solicitors, and I'd also like to welcome all interested parties. So we're here to consider a new premises licence to allow regulated entertainment, late night refreshment and the sale of alcohol on the premises. Okay, I now have a list of details about said application. So the premises is Mickey's Beach Bar, Restaurant and Cafe and Patisserie Glacerie, which is at Unit 1 Sideshore on the Queen's Drive in Exmouth. The members present today, as you have seen, are myself, Councillor Kim Bloxham, who's the Vice Chair, and Councillor Maddie Chapman. We also have present Mr. Saunders, who is the Licensing Manager, Mrs. Barber, the Licensing Officer, who will be outlining the application, Ms. Thompson, the Democratic Services Officer, who will be assisting with the running of the hearing, Mrs. Jenkins, who will be doing likewise, Mr. Asta Ranatunga, who's the committee's legal advisor, Ms. Heal, Council Solicitor, who's acting as legal support to the committee, and Ms. Williams, who is a Council Solicitor who will be supporting Ms. Hill. Right, so this is a hearing to consider an application for a premises licence under the Licensing Act of 2003. I would now like to identify who is present, who's already given notice to the council in writing that they wish to address the subcommittee and their representatives. Is that something that do we need everybody to say they're present, or have we done that on the way in?
Chair, we've done that on the way in, and I will be making a note for the record of everybody who's present.
That's fantastic. That saves 10 minutes. Okay, so the applicant or representative of the applicant is Mayor Beach Limited, represented by, as I say, Mr. Gareth Pinwell of Ashford Solicitors. The responsible authority is East Devon District Council Environmental Health, who is represented by Miss Alice Gill, who is an EHO. Subcommittee members will have read the documents submitted by the parties in advance of this hearing. So any document that anyone has brought with them today may only be submitted to us if all the other parties to this hearing agree, as required by the hearings regulations. Anyone wishing to introduce further documentary evidence should make that request immediately before they begin to address the subcommittee. So if you have any new documents, please let us know before you speak, and we'll see if that we're able to, if they are admissible. Okay, when it comes to speaking, the maximum time for any party to address us will be 10 minutes. When addressing us, you should not raise any new issues not covered in the representations you've already lodged with the council, and nor should you raise issues which are not relevant to the promotion of the licensing objectives at issue in this hearing. There will be time for discussion. Where I think it helpful, I may choose to lead a discussion, as that may be the most effective way of identifying key concerns and possible solutions. But I do wish to avoid formal cross-examination, and where relevant, I will allow questions at appropriate points, but that must come through me because there's lots of us here, and that's the way that we need to do it. The plan and application has been circulated in the papers, already circulated to all parties. So the subcommittee's legal advisor will briefly go through the procedure for today's hearing. Asita, am I saying your name right? I must apologise.
No, that's absolutely fine. In terms of pronunciation, it's Asita Ranatunga. So absolutely fine. And just to summarise the procedure, the licensing officer will first summarise the relevant facts and issues. And then there are 4 parts to the meeting. The first part is the applicant, represented by solicitors, to present the application and refer to statements in support by other persons. Members of the subcommittee are then entitled to question the applicant, and interested parties then, or their representatives, can raise questions of the applicant, but that's through the chair and at the discretion of the chair. Next will be part 2, which is the interested parties, otherwise known as objectors, or their representatives can address the subcommittee. Again, in the same way, members of the subcommittee can then question interested parties, and then the applicant can raise questions of interested parties, again, at the discretion of the chair and through the chair. Part 3 is then for the applicant applying for the premises license to make a final statement, or summing up as it's sometimes known. And then part 4 is that the subcommittee meeting will end, so the public aspect of the meeting will end for members to debate their decision. The decision will be notified in writing to all parties within 5 working days. It's not anticipated that any decision will be given today, but within 5 working days, the decision will be published. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Okay, so we will first hear from the licensing officer. Leslie, if you could present your report, that would be marvellous. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to everybody here. So today the committee are asked to consider an application for a new premises licence at Mickey's Beach Bar and Restaurant, Queen's Drive in Exmouth. And as you'll be aware, this is part of the new sideshore development down on the seafront. So the proposed licensed area includes a 2-storey building with outside seating along with an adjacent event space. And the proposed area is best viewed on the site plan, which is provided at Appendix B, which is page 40 of the report. And you'll note from the site plan that the proposed licensed area is outlined with a continuous red line. That is the area where licensable activities will take place. So the licensable activities proposed are the sale of alcohol for consumption on the premises, late night refreshment, and also regulated entertainment. In total, we've received 78 representations against this application. It's worth noting that a number of conditions were agreed between the applicant and the police prior to submission of the application, and these conditions are included within the provision, I beg your pardon, these conditions include the provision of door staff and also CCTV within the premises. When the applicant submitted their application, the conditions were included within the operating schedule, and these can be seen at Appendix F within the report. So at this stage, my understanding is that an agreement has been reached between environmental health and the applicant, with extra conditions proposed by the environmental health officer, and the applicant has accepted those conditions during a period of mediation between the two parties. The environmental health information that's contained at Appendix G within the report. All other representations from local residents can be viewed within the body of the report itself. I'm not proposing to refer to any of those in particular at this stage, and we'll be aware that the committee already have those, as I say, within the report. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Just to let you know, if I turn my camera off, I'm juggling hundreds of bits of paper here. So it's just not very dignified for you all to watch that. So that's what's going on. Okay, so part one, the applicant's case. So you have 10 minutes to speak regarding the application, and you will be given a 30-second warning. So this would be Mr. Pimwell.
Good morning, Chair and
Good morning.
Subcommittee. I'm Gareth Pimwell of Ashford Solicitors, and I appear before you on behalf of the applicant Mayor Beach Limited for their venue at Exmouth. I appreciate you have a full and comprehensive report prepared by your officers, which directs you to the relevant legal considerations in exercising your discretion as to whether to grant a licence. I'm also aware of the number of representations that you have received in response to the application, and I welcome the opportunity to address you on the application and respond to the issues raised by the representations. In terms of my client company, the directors have extensive experience in the restaurant and hospitality industry and are a highly regarded brand. The venue is a significant investment for them into the town of Exmouth, and they fully intend to operate it in a way commensurate with their other businesses. The nature of the objections can be grouped together in a series of themes: perceived noise issues from the operation of the premises, objection to the hours of operation sought by the application, and wider issues of concern not directly attributable to the operation of the premises. In terms of acoustic issues, the building has been designed and built to the highest standard, with the building facing the sea away from residential properties. It benefits from a high degree of noise attenuation through its design and purpose-built sound system, which is controlled centrally. We can appreciate that restaurants may be apprehensive of a new venue and its effects on the local environment. Being mindful of these issues, the client company engaged an acoustic consultant to advise it, and his remit was to engage with your environmental health officer so as the impact of the venue could be understood and any effects appropriately mitigated. The process involved the consultant measuring background noise levels near the residential properties with no entertainment or music being played, and then carrying out tests of the sound systems in the premises at maximum levels, with the environmental health officer present, with observation being undertaken inside and outside of the premises. As a consequence of those meetings and observations, a series of agreed conditions relating to acoustic issues have been put forward by the environmental health officer and agreed by my clients. I suggest this presents you with an agreed solution backed by input from our acoustic noise consultant and the council's own professional environmental health officer, that the venue can operate appropriately in a way that will not infringe any of the licensing objectives in respect of its acoustic impact. Turning to hours of operation, there are many objections which state that if the hours of operation for these premises were as at the Ocean venue, then those persons would not object to the application. As you will appreciate, you as the members have to consider our application on its merits and any relevant comments made against the licensing objectives, and then make an appropriate decision. I have a copy of the current premises for the Ocean facility, and I've supplied the council with a copy in advance of this hearing. It's able to serve alcohol from 9 AM in the morning until midnight Sunday to Wednesday, and 9 AM until 1 AM in the morning Sunday to Thursday, with similar hours on bank holidays and New Year's Eve. The licence was granted by this council on the 15th of October 2013. In terms of live music, the hours are 9 AM to midnight Sunday to Wednesday, and 9 AM to 1 o'clock Thursday to Saturday and bank holiday Sundays. And in respect of recorded music, 9 AM to midnight Sunday to Wednesday, and 9 AM to 1 AM Thursday to Saturday and bank holiday Sundays. My clients are requesting license of hours of 11 AM to 2 AM. This request is based on the current operating regime of venues of this nature, and in reality is a modest increase in the terminal hour that you have previously approved at Ocean 8 years ago. If you consider the application, the police have raised no objections on any of the licensing objectives. We believe this is due to extensive pre-application discussion with them to satisfy them as to the nature and quality of the proposed operation. There is no actual evidence before you to suggest that the opening hours sought for the premises will offend the licensing objectives. There are within the letters of objection expressions of anticipated issues, but these are not based on actual facts pertaining to the premises. Therefore, I can see no actual evidence before you that the proposed hours sought will offend any of the licensing objectives. Stop. Your report also draws attention to deregulation, which has taken place since the grant of the Ocean licence, and the permitted hours of operation for live and recorded music at premises where less than 500 people are present. Again, the application made by the client company in respect of live music requests a shorter period of operation from 12 noon to 11 PM, whereas the deregulation allows music from 8 AM until 11 PM. And in respect of recorded music, the applicant requests a permission from 7 AM to 2 AM. I would respectfully suggest that you should consider these requests in light of deregulation, and when you consider that your environmental health officer has raised no objections and agreed conditions to support the level of the operation, I can see no actual evidence to lead you to approve different hours of operation other than those applied for. In respect of the other licensing objectives of prevention of crime and disorder, protection of children from harm and public safety, all these issues are the responsibility on the premises for my clients. We have set out operating procedures and measures as part of both the pre-application process and in our application. As a consequence of our liaison with the local police, who are the primary organisation who will deal with such matters, they have raised no objection to the proposed operation and procedures. The representations also raise issues that are not within the control of the clients and are not relevant to the licensing objectives when you consider these applications. These should not form part of your deliberations on the application. I would suggest to you that there are no actual factual objections in front of you which are derived from the operation of the premises, as this is a new premises. As a consequence, I would respectfully suggest that these license objectives are not offended by my client's proposal. In summary, I would suggest to you that my clients has addressed issues of concern raised by the letters of representation. The hours of operation sought for the various licensable activities are reasonable and have not raised any objection from the council or the local police. Other issues raised in the representations are largely anticipatory of the opening of the premises, and there is no direct evidence in front of you that the operation of the premises will give rise to these anticipated eventualities. I would respectfully ask you to consider these comments and your officer's report and grant the license for the premises as sought by my client company. Thank you for listening to me. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very, very much.
I mute myself, Chair, now again.
Yeah, that's fine. Although we will obviously be asking questions now. So okay, so first of all, members of the subcommittee, do you have any questions? I have one to begin with, actually. The application suggests opening until 2 o'clock on weekdays. Is it likely that the premises will be open until 2 every day of the week?
Chair, I think it will be unlikely during the early days of the week, but the clients, if they have events or special events in the premises, want that flexibility. That they will operate as a commercial concern and operating hours. Potentially at weekends, it will be later than the early week, but they want to retain the flexibility of those opening hours should they need to hold an event or open for a special event, for instance. Okay,
thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have 2 questions. The outside site space, sale of alcohol, is it 11:30 or 11 p.m. being asked for here? It's not clear. And also, as weddings, etc., for the outside event under a marquee was put forward, there will obviously be children there. I am mindful that children frequently need the toilet, and therefore will the children be required to walk through the bar to get to the toilet if they're attending a wedding or any festival or anything in the outside area, please?
Councillor, in terms of the terminal hour for the, if I call it the marquee area, that's 11 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
In relation to children attending events in the marquee, at present, it would be proposed that there would be separate facilities in the form of probably either portable toilets that you see at events, or if those were not possible, then they would use the facilities within the bar.
So we're saying that children will go through the bar between 10
they
and
may
11
go through the
o'clock
bar.
at night. Okay, right, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Chapman, thank you. Councillor Bloxham.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whibley. Yeah, can I ask what the event space will be used for outside of April to October? Because I note that you've said that the space will be used between April and October for events.
Councillor, at the moment, it's proposed to be a marquee, and we're proposing the operation will just be during those months, and that the marquee will then be taken down for the winter. And we don't anticipate sort of outside events in the winter.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question on that then, please, Chair?
Certainly.
Yep.
Oh, so sorry.
That's okay. Will that event space then have fixed furniture throughout the time when the space is not being used?
I don't know the answer to that question. We would see the marquee being removed, and I don't think people would probably want to sit there in the winter. I could take instruction on that from the clients and come back to you later in the meeting.
That would be good. Thank you very much.
Okay. When I get a break, I'll ring them and ask them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bloxham. Okay, so now we will move to questions from interested parties. I must stress at this point, questions only, because you'll be given the opportunity to make your representations later. But if any of the interested parties here would like to speak, could you raise your electronic hands if you're able to? So I see Jane with your hand up. Are you able to raise your electronic hand?
Unfortunately, I've done what was told and I cannot raise my electronic hand, but I don't have that icon at the bottom. I've gone into part anyway. Yeah, I do have a question.
Okay.
It was going to be part of what I wanted to say later, but I want to ask the applicant's representative representative who has just spoken, has he actually read the updated statement of the 7th District Council on page 36, and I want to reference 536, which is a paragraph about risk. If not, I'd be happy to read it out now, or I can wait until it's time for my my speaking slot.
I think that would probably be best. If
very
that's
much
okay.
relates to what the applicant's what the applicant's representative has just said regarding no actual evidence.
Mr. Pinwell, do you want to come back on that? Are you aware of said paragraph?
I've read the report and the paragraph, sir, but if the premises is not opened, what I would say to the committee is there cannot be any evidence attributable to the premises, because simply we've not operated.
That's exactly what this statement contradicts, in fact. I'll read it to you quickly now, please, if I may, and then I won't repeat it later.
Okay.
This paragraph says, it should be noted that when determining an application, the authority is making a judgment about risk. A key purpose of the licensing function is to not respond to crime, disorder, nuisance, or public harm once it has happened, but to make an informed assessment of the risk of such things occurring if a license is granted, and to take such steps as it considers appropriate to prevent or minimize such risks. So I completely reject what the applicant's representative has said about there being no factual evidence. We do not want to allow that risk to happen. Thank you. Okay,
thank you. If I appreciate that. If we can try and ask direct questions, that would be great. Okay, so Michelle Ward, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Just to carry on regarding the noise issue or potential noise issue, in the event space with erection of marquees, etc., one presumes it will be used for celebrations, weddings, etc., etc. At such events, there will be music required, no doubt, at these celebrations. And I understand that the tents and all marquees erected count therefore as indoors, and therefore music can be played. I take the point that in the buildings, the noise could be controlled, but what about noise control emanating from a marquee?
Mr. Pinwell.
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of use of the marquee, it's the intention of the clients to fully cooperate with the council before it comes into any operation. We would carry out a similar process that we've carried out with regard to the building, so that the council has assurance that the marquee will operate within recognised limits and not offend the licensing objectives.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can I just make a comment? I think it would be very difficult to control noise levels from a marquee because of the very nature of that structure. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Simon Davidson.
Yes, good morning. A question then for the applicant's representative. He mentions that a consultant carried out a study of the acoustics by comparing ambient noise with the expected level of noise resulting from the internal sound system. At what time of day was the survey of ambient noise carried out?
Mr. Pinwell.
If I can just go to the acoustic report in the bundle.
What's this one?
forgive me, I'm now there, Chair.
No, that's fine. I'm currently looking too.
If it would assist, it's page 155 within the report.
It says that it was actually carried out during the morning of Friday the 19th of March and the morning of Tuesday the 23rd of March.
Thank you. So considering that this is an application which is expected to lead to late night operation, later than is operated either by the ocean or by the pavilion, how can a measurement of ambient noise taken in the morning compare with the expected ambient noise late at night, and therefore the uplift versus ambient noise late at night that would result from operation of the premises? The two things just aren't comparable. It's not a meaningful survey.
Can I just ask, where we have the graphs of environmental noise time history, that does appear to cover evening periods as well, with the 4 different measures of sound.
Yes, the report says that, sir, and then you've got the graphs at the back. So there was noise monitoring in place throughout from Friday the 19th of March to Saturday the 20th of March, and then Saturday the 20th of March to Sunday the 21st of March. And you can see at the bottom of the graphs, it shows you the time when the actual noise meter was running. So they were.
With respect, I'm not au fait with all of the detailed reports that have been prepared by your client or your consultants. So can you just give a summary to the people present at this meeting of what the results were?
Well, look, I am not a noise consultant either, sir. However, what I can say to you is that a report has been prepared, a noise meter has been placed close to the residential premises, and it has recorded a noise time history over 2 days from a Friday and a Saturday, when one would expect the noise climate, as you suggest, perhaps to be a realistic period to record over, and it has recorded noise levels for those periods. The report has been passed to the council's professional environmental health officer, who is an acoustic expert, and as a consequence, the 2 parties have agreed a set of conditions that they consider will ensure the operation of the premises does not offend the licensing objectives.
So
I think, sorry,
may I ask
Mr.
a
Davidson.
supplementary question?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So given that this survey was apparently done overnight, which wasn't the initial reply from the applicant, how does the overnight survey of noise compare with noise that would emanate from either pavilion or from ocean when they are operating late at night? Was any benchmark taken of that?
Chair, in response, this is our application. We are responsible for any noise emanating from our premises. We have liaised with the council's environmental health officer as to the survey and agreed conditions, and I don't see that we can do any more. If the council had wanted comparative evidence, that's a matter for the council to ask, and we've not received such a request.
Yeah, and in terms of applications, they're all considered on their own merit, and I think to be fair, the noise emanating from ocean is not necessarily relevant at this point. Thank you very much, Mr. Davidson. Mr. I believe is it Mr. and Mrs. Rees-Jenkins?
Yeah, it is. Hello.
Brilliant. Hello.
I've got quick points. One, we live in Trefusis Terrace. the noise from the seafront in general is something that we live in the seaside, at the seaside, so we don't mind. But if you want to ask me when the fishing boats go out, I can tell you. We hear all the noise. So any extra noise from a new venue after 11 or 11:30 is not acceptable. Before that time, we completely understand that that is a noise which happens on a seafront. So
can I just ask, do you have a question? Because this is something that you can make as part of your representation later.
So would he accept, would the proprietor accept that noise after 11 would be unacceptable to people who live just above? We can hear all the building noises. We know it's going to be unacceptable. Can he change his proposal?
Mr. Pinwell?
Chair, it's not for me to change my proposal. I've made a presentation to you backed by acoustic evidence, which has been accepted by your environmental health officer. So I don't think I can add any more.
Can I say one other thing? So your venue will enlarge the need for parking. People will park around us. Have you got sufficient parking for the type of entertainment you're going to be doing? Have you got sufficient parking?
Ms. Pinwell, I mean that I believe that there is parking available.
Is it enough?
I'm not sure how that fits with the licensing objectives, to be fair. Mr. Pinwell, do you want to respond to that at all?
It's people in
the... I would suggest to you that parking and facilities is something that would have been considered at the date planning consent for the development was granted, and that parking facilities don't fall within the remit of a licensing application.
Can I ask one more thing, dear Mr. Solicitor? What the residents are worrying about is impact upon our lives. So what we're asking you is, how are you going to make sure that the impact of your venue is not going to completely alter our quality of life?
I think, to be fair, the mitigation measures for that are fairly well outlined in the report. Mr. Pinwell, if you'd like to respond. Sorry, you're muted. Yeah, it's the first time we've said that today. That took a while. That was good going. That's 50 minutes. Well done.
Can I just say one other thing? I used to have a catering business. I know all about marquees and noise. The noise is going to be huge.
Okay. Mr. Pinwell, would you like to respond to the previous question?
Yeah, through you, Chair, yes. We're aware of potential noise impacts. We've engaged with the police and an acoustic consultant who's prepared a report. We've liaised with your environmental health officer, and the environmental health officer has agreed conditions with us. I don't think I can say any more.
They don't live here, though.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Robert Tweedy.
Hello, thank you, Chair. So I have 3 questions, if I may. Is the marquee going to be a permanent fixture from April to October? I was going to echo the control measures question, which includes the terraces, and I'd also like to know how come from the initial application, it said that there was not going to be any noise from neighbouring noise-sensitive premises, and then in a later report, it's now gone to plus 5 dB throughout the day. And I just want to know why and how that's changed, please. And may I also offer my services as an experienced sound engineer who's also lectured at a university, that I can debunk the acoustic report as well. If you have any questions with that, please allow me to answer any technical queries.
If you're registered to speak later on, yeah, which I see you are, people will be able to ask you that, and that can form part of your representation. Yeah, Ms. Pinwell, would you like to respond to those questions?
Yes, in terms of the marquee April to October, it's intended to be there April to October and then be removed for the winter. So that's the first question there. In terms of control measures, the premises themselves have been examined by our acoustic consultant. I know you have a different view on the acoustic report because of your expertise, and you'll present that later. But we've liaised with environmental health, we've had an acoustic report, and we've agreed operating conditions. I don't see what else it's possible we can do in the circumstances.
So the control measures for inside the building have been determined with the soundproofing, but not the terraces and the...
forgive me. The environmental health officer who can confirm to you has attended all parts of the building and observed the building with the sound system operating and has agreed those conditions. So again, we fully cooperated. We've shown the environmental health officer all of the areas. We've tested the sound system and we have come up with a set of agreed conditions.
Thank you, I appreciate that. However, I'm not asking about the building, I'm asking about what's going on outside the building. And can I confirm that the acoustic report is actually a control report, and it's like measuring background noise prior to the building even existing, so that any future measurements can be measured against it?
The methodology of the report was carried out with the building in situ.
However, the sound system wasn't being played while the measurement microphones are in place. So if you read the document, it says that if any future measurements need to be done, this is regarding when the building is operational and the impact. So then we can measure the impact against this report. So this is like when they test a drug, they give someone a placebo to see if it actually works. This is the baseline of what happens when the venue is not operational, and then anything that when the venue does become operational, they can then do another acoustic report and measure the impact, and with the +5 dB, see if they're actually going +5 dB, or as we all expecting, more than +5 dB.
Okay, I think so. What you're saying is that these environmental noise time history doesn't include what wasn't carried out whilst the building was operational, which obviously is difficult because the building isn't operational. I think so.
It's the control. They're going to measure against it.
Absolutely. I think it is dangerous for us to say, as we all expect it will be, because at this point we don't know. And I would imagine, Mr. Pinwell, would you be prepared to or would your client be prepared to carry out such a thing as and when the building is operational, and sort of fairly regular noise monitoring?
Yes, they would be. At the moment, we can't. We've engaged a consultant. We've liaised with environmental health, and we believe we have a set of conditions will not offend the licensing objectives. And as we are today, that's where we are. Should there need to be a test before opening, I'm sure that can be arranged.
Okie doke. Thank you very much.
That was my third question. It hasn't been answered. Is why has it been increased to 5 dB? When your initial application said that there would be no noise from the facade and open sensitive neighbours. Why has that changed? You're muted.
You're muted again. -5 dB.
I am not an acoustic engineer. You have the benefit of your knowledge. Those measures were agreed by the two professionals representing my client company and the environmental health officer as an appropriate tolerance. I have to rely on their professional judgment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, cheers. Okay, we have another question from Martin Hezloth.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
I want to ask one question. Chairman, when you were introducing this matter and asking your question, you suggested that the plan was premises stay until 2 o'clock. As I understood it, alcohol was to be served until 2 o'clock, but the premises were to remain open until 2:30 in the morning. So I'd like to ask Mr. Pinwell what the position in fact is proposed.
That may well be my mistake, Mr. Pinwell. Can you clarify that?
Yes, the period for alcohol sales will be until 2 a.m. and then will be the usual 30 minutes to empty the premises.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Anita, do we have any unelectronic hands, real actual hands being raised that I haven't spotted?
I'm looking at the second screen. I can't see that anybody else is indicating that they wish to speak. I'm watching for actual people with actual hands.
It's a novelty in this day and age, isn't it? Real hands. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Pinwell. We now move to part 2, the interested parties case. I would like to remind you all that we have members of the committee have all read your representations, which have been submitted prior to the meeting and have been included in the reports. So what I would ask is that you don't just read out your representation and try not to repeat points that have been made. And I will be reasonably straight on this. Please remember to confine your points to the 4 licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, the prevention of public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. You will have 10 minutes to speak regarding the application, and you will be given a 30-second warning. Okay, so the list as I have it is Jane Ashton. If you wish to speak now, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I am going to actually question something you have just said, Chair, because the sticking to the 4 objectives, I understand we must do that. However, in looking at the Licensing Act revised policy, which was revised and put into place in January this year from East Devon District Council, it has almost gone as far as recognising protection of environmental harm as a 5th objective. Continued preservation and protection of the coastal seafront areas and locations will be an ongoing consideration under this policy. And the other thing it's done, it has recognised that the licensing authority and committee may use its discretion. So put those 2 things together, and I hope we will be able to consider that the environment is a valid objection. I'll go back to that one in a minute, but first of all, I feel so strongly about this now, having heard the applicant's speaker. I want, regarding public safety, hours.
Jane, your sound cut out then. You just want to start that sentence again?
I'm sorry,
Cheers.
did you? Okay, I'm sorry. Regarding public
safety, it might be worth you turning your video off. Sometimes people's sound quality improves if you don't have the video.
Okay.
Brilliant.
I'm
okay, that's
about
fine.
Public safety here and risk. 15 hours alcohol availability, a dangerous current, and the dark. It is a recipe for a risk to life. These premises are on the southwest coastal path as well. Alcohol impaired judgment might lead some visitors to head home over that path at 2:30 in the morning. Whilst we can't play nursemaid or block the coastal path, we can limit drinking hours in the establishment nearest to that unlit route, which is prone to cliff erosion. Look, that risk of an alcohol-related tragedy could be minimised by 10% just by stopping serving alcohol 1.5 hours earlier than proposed. What are we going to do? Selfishly ignore that risk in exchange for greater financial profit? And I go back to the paragraph that I read out earlier, which says the licensing function is to avoid that risk, take steps to consider that before it actually happens. Our community doesn't want to feel responsible for that. Going back to the environment, I have made the point in my representations about polycarbonate drinking vessels. The polycarbonate takes hundreds and hundreds of years to biodegrade. It leaches plastic particles into the environment over that time. Even the manufacturers acknowledge that now. The term biodegradable was a misnomer. I'm quoting one of the manufacturers of polycarbonate. Conditions must be put into place for strict monitoring and policing of the outside areas to ensure that those drink containers don't leave the premises. In fact, don't use them. The well-being of all members of the public should be taken into consideration. All members. The greater number of customers and the further away from the main premises, the greater the potential for noise and litter and disturbance of other members of the public. That's residents, visitors, those wanting a quiet walk along the seafront, sitters and stargazers in day and night. We've just had International Dark Sky Week with David Attenborough and Chris Packham telling us of those effects. Stargazing gives us an understanding of our place in humanity. It's an inspiration to artists and poets, particularly near the ocean. Well, artificial light inhibits the sense of awe and wonder, which affects the well-being of many. So for those reasons, I would suggest the license to serve alcohol on the event space should be applied for at the appropriate time for each special event. Serving alcohol outside should be limited to serving seated customers on the terraces immediately outside the restaurant bar. And checks should be made that customers leaving the premises do not take drinks with them. And I also suggest that members of staff would need to be employed long after closing hours to ensure that the public footpath, the cycle path, and particularly the beach are all free from wind-blown, discarded, or escaped plastic drinking vessels. Leaving that for the morning shift will be too late. Streets seen are overworked. We have a tide, fast currents, and strong winds. I do support the serving of alcohol at the restaurant on the sideshore site to customers seated at tables. I do not support the hours proposed. Few would expect a restaurant to not have an alcohol license. However, few in this community would expect a restaurant to have an alcohol license until 2 o'clock in the morning. It's not surprising that these proposed licensing hours for alcohol, recorded and live music, and a resident DJ, late night refreshments, have led residents to ask the question, what is the difference between this application and that of a nightclub? Because on this development, residents expected a restaurant, probably licensed, seated customers at tables enjoying alcohol with their meal. And that's because the design and access statement of the planning application stated The lease will restrict the use of the site as a water sports centre with ancillary restaurant, cafe and retail only. Ancillary, the definition is subsidiary, providing necessary support to the primary activities of the site. There was no mention of a bar, and there certainly was no mention that the ground floor would be primarily a bar area with a resident DJ. It's not ancillary. This is an oversized restaurant bar on a site we expect it to be primarily a water sports centre. I've said here I'm going to repeat the paragraph on risk, but I'm not, because I've said it twice now. Many here today recognise the real risks of these proposals, what they pose, and we urge the committee to recognise these risks too. That's why our concerns, based on experience, should not be taken lightly. It's actually our duty to voice the potential consequences of irresponsible practices. That includes these licensing proposals. And it is the authority's duty to look at potential risks, even though we have not seen them yet. If I've got some time left, I've looked at some of the conditions that were mentioned in Appendix C at the end of the policy statement. And there are a number of conditions which could be put in place, which might put residents' minds at rest, or that might help us feel not so guilty about providing something that could be a risk to life, a risk to the environment, and a risk to the health and well-being of residents. I've got a number of things which I added to my original representation regarding coastal communities and the health and well-being, and I gave references there, so I hope some of you have been able to look at those, how damaging it can be to take away the possibility for traditional
30 seconds remaining.
Okay, for traditional seaside activities from, and not listen to the considerations of the residents. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Jane. I think you do make some valid points there, but I would say things such as what the use of the building is now compared to what it was believed to be, that is a planning issue, and that's not an issue that we can consider in terms of determining this. But thank you very, very much for your representation there. Does anybody from the committee have any questions to Ms. Ashton? No. Okay. Mr. Pinwell, do you wish to respond or question that at all? I can't see you.
Just a few comments, Chair. In terms of polycarbonate vessels, that's a requirement of the police that we have to comply with, and you impose as a licensing authority. In terms of the control of the premises, there are clear statements in our application that we will have staff and door security when required to ensure that people do behave properly, do not consume excess alcohol, and if they are, they will not be allowed in the premises. My clients want to operate a responsible premises which is complementary to Exmouth.
Okay, thank you very, very much. Our next representative is Mr. David Buller. You have 10 minutes and you'll get a 30-second warning.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say up front that I welcome the arrival of Sideshore on the seafront. It's certainly an iconic building in a stunning setting. I'm sure it'll be a major asset for the town. However, in my view, the very fact that it occupies such a privileged and unique position bang on the shoreline and on the border with the Mere Nature Reserve and very close to a Ramsar site. These are one of the highest, most protected international designations for nature reserves for waterfowl. Brings with it its own responsibilities to operate in keeping with the area. And I think that the extended operating licenses hours that have been applied for conflict with this implicit obligation. I think this is the issue here. It's the extended operating hours that are being asked for. I want to say I do agree with Jane Ashton's comments on the not being able to work in environmental issues as a factor in the licensing application, because much is made on Sideshore's website of it being a sustainable development that not only preserves and protects its local environment, but it provides a lasting legacy to the local community. Well, I actually find it astonishing, therefore, that there appears to be no need to address the issues of sustainability and environmental impact as part of this licensing application. It's well known that pollution, whether it's plastic cups, light, noise, litter, smells, adversely affect all wildlife, including marine life. And given Sideshore's unique location, this matter really should be given more weight. However, restricting myself to the 4 licensing objectives. Firstly, prevention of crime and disorder. It seems likely to me that what we're talking about is really an extended near 24-hour licensing hours for consumption of alcohol. And if these are granted, it's going to lead to an unacceptable and increased level of disruptive behaviour, possibly leading to property damage and affray as late night revellers leave the Sideshore and journey through the quiet residential areas nearby. On public safety, there's two main points really. As I understand it, there's very limited CCTV monitoring of that section around the seafront. And so there will be an increased need for police to patrol. And I think we're all expecting an uptick in the levels of antisocial behaviour and possibly petty crime. And what really concerns me is that the Sideshore is directly opposite an area of the estuary, which is a very dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous stretch of water on that section. And I'm fearful that late night revellers are going to be tempted to enter the water with tragic consequences. Moving on to public nuisance, I can tell you I live in Cypress Road, and from personal experience I know that loud music carries a long way from the shoreline at night under calm conditions. And because I've had some disturbed sleep, thinking of when events are put on in Powderham in the summer. And and at the Pavilion, we've heard music there. Now these are infrequent, they don't happen very often, so we put up with that. But if we're talking about possibility of this happening every weekend of the year, then I think that's it's stepping up to another level. Sideshore, as you all know, is close to a quiet residential area which contains several assisted living developments, and rowdy behaviour of patrons leaving the premises late at night are going to certainly add to public nuisance. That's all I want to say, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Does anybody from the subcommittee have any questions? No. Okay. Mr. Pinwell, do you have any questions?
No, Chair. I think we've covered a lot of the issues already, so I don't want to unduly prolong the hearing.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Okay. Can I just ask, is on the order of this list, I've missed Councillor David Poor. He's not highlighted in this list as somebody who's going to speak. Is it Councillor Poor? Are you going to be speaking? You are, right, because you're representing Exmouth Town Council.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to speak on behalf of Exmouth Town Council.
Okay, go for it.
Councillor Bailey was going to come along but couldn't make it, so I've come in his place.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. If you'd like to begin, you have 10 minutes. You will get a 30-second warning.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Councillor David Poor, Councillor for Littleton, and the side shore is in my ward. I'm not going to repeat what the planning committee has represented already. Those notes are present in your report. Our view as a town council mirrors virtually all the objections from the individuals around in the area. We believe strongly that the licensing hours should be the same as the ocean. I live often and way near the junction with Salton Road. I'm 2 miles away from the seafront and from the Queen's Drive. I can hear what's happening on the Queen's Drive during the music sessions. I can almost hear the individual words being spoken by individual singers. That gives an indication of how widespread the noise pollution could be. Our other concern is what happens when people leave the premises. It's already been said about crime and also public safety. We do not know how many people will be leaving at once. It could be a lot. They will cause public nuisance in the centre of town. They could cause public nuisance along Stolton Road. They could cause public nuisance in Foxhole. This is a concern to us. It's not obviously not directly part of the licence, but it is linked to the licence. If the premises close earlier, then the risk to public nuisance is going to be much less, as has been said by Jane Ashton. We think this is a great asset to Exmouth, and we wish it well, but we need to set the ground rules now, so it's both A, successful, and also acts as an asset to the community. And at the present moment, I think the balance is wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Poor. Does anybody from the subcommittee have any questions regarding Exmouth Town Council's representations? No. Okay, does Mr. Pinwell, do you have any questions for Councillor Poor?
No, it's really to comment on the issues that are being raised in terms of noise. I think what they're now well rehearsed so far as we've got in this hearing, so I won't comment further. In terms of the operation of the premises, my client wants to operate it as an asset to Exmouth and will have procedures in place so it operates properly and does not contribute to public nuisance. And I think having set out those procedures and put them in front of the local police, if there were issues, I would have expected a representation, and there are none.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I would suggest that we take 10 minutes now. Well, it's a little bit early, but if we take 10 minutes now, and we will reconvene at 11 o'clock. Just to warn you that YouTube will still be running, so if you could mute and maybe turn your camera off while we take a break, it's best for all concerned if we do that, I think. Okay, so we'll see you at 11. Thank you very much. Are we ready to go again?
I think we are ready to continue when you are, Chair, if all the members of the committee are present.
Thank you very, very much. So we return to interested parties representations, and our next speaker is Daphne Courier.
Okay, can you hear me?
We certainly can.
Good.
So you've got 10 minutes, 30-second warning, etc.
Thank you. Like many people, I'm pleased to see we now have a water sports centre. And like a lot of people, I'd like the licensing hours to stop at 11 p.m. One of my main concerns is public safety due to the position of this venue near to a very dangerous part of the water. I had a look at the legal status to see who is responsible for beach safety, and it is the council. It lies halfway between the council and the individual. It's up to the council to put safety notices up to warn people, but it's up to the individuals to then take it on board. However, at night time, you can't see the boards, it's dark, there's no lifeguard, there's no flags up, it's night time. So I would like to see a condition of some portable safety barriers at every exit from the venue with a no swimming warning sign on, something like, you're welcome to walk on our beach, but please be aware this is a hazardous no swimming zone. It wouldn't be good publicity for anybody if there was a drowning incident in that area at night. And when people have had a few drinks, they get silly. The venue are doing all they can, I'm sure, to ensure good behaviour and safety on the premises. And we can only concern ourselves today with what is happening on the premises. However, the wider issues should be taken into account. We're not really supposed to, but clearly people arriving to the site and leaving the site, that's when there's going to be a problem. And if somebody's playing up, if somebody gets drunk on the site, what do? Throw them out? Then where do they go? It needs really careful thinking about. Noise and disturbance has been covered very well by the residents. And I'd just like to add one thing, which is that noise travels over water. We've thought about the way the noise travels back up towards the residents. Water isn't a barrier to noise, it goes straight across. So it will affect wildlife on the Dawlish area. They can't complain. We have to complain on their behalf or just point that issue out. Now, I'd just like to make 4 points. It's 4, 3, 2, 1. Number 1 is 4. If this venue operates from 7 a.m. till 2:30 in the morning, that only leaves 4.5 hours when nothing is happening. If it takes the staff to set up and clear the premises away, that really cuts it down to about 4 hours. Is 4 hours sufficient for the area to renew itself and for residents to get some rest? It seems, when you look at it that way, 4 hours in 24 hours when nothing is happening, it's not very long. Now here's 3. 3 years ago, there was nothing on this site at all except for a flat level car park, nothing. The wild sea on one side and a nature reserve on the other side. So within 3 years, we now have a potential for a massive public nuisance, and many aspects of this public nuisance are going to be covered by other people. Car doors slamming, people saying good night, etc. Now number 3, that was number 3. 2, we've got 2 options. We have a water sports centre. We also have a restaurant. The people of Exmouth were promised an international multi-million pounds water sports centre, but since it's been built, all we've heard about is restaurant, restaurant, restaurant. We've got to decide what we want. Do we want a party venue and a hotspot, or do we want a water sports centre? Because I'd really, really like to see more done to promote the water sports centre. It's gone a very funny direction, this. People arriving and leaving, that is going to be where the problem is, I think, and parking all over the place irresponsibly. I know that happens in Exmouth. And down to 1, we've got one planet. Harm to children. If we trash this planet, we are harming our children. It's very difficult to make these points stick with the limited rules that we're allowed to speak on. But it doesn't take much thinking to realise that 3 years ago there was nothing here. Now we've got this huge venue. We're looking at having 150 people, another extra 100 people, maybe another 150 outside where there was nothing before. It's going to make a massive impact on the environment and the local residents. So we've got 4 hours for recovery, 3 years all this has happened. 2 options. Do we want a water sports centre or a hotspot and party venue, which personally I think would be better placed in the middle of town where there are already taxi ranks, buses, trains and cameras. And we've just got one chance to get this right. That's my one chance and one planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daphne. I think you were fairly clear as to what was addressing the licensing objectives then. So thank you very, very much. Does anybody from the subcommittee have any questions for Daphne? No. Okay, Mr. Pinwell, would you like to ask Daphne any questions with regards to her representation?
The only comment I would make, Chair, for the record, is we have no intent of causing massive public nuisance. We have made this application, we've liaised with the regulatory bodies and we have no objections. It is not the intent of the applicants to cause massive public nuisance. It wants to operate a quality venue that will be an asset to Exmouth.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you, Daphne. Now, our next speaker will be Councillor Ollie Davey. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Chair.
10 minutes, 30-second warning, etc.
Oh, that's all right. I won't need that. Yes, I mean, I know this is not strictly relevant, but we were told this was a water sports centre. And okay, it's going to have associated catering with it. That's understandable. But now we are looking at an event space, a late night event space at that. This is an application until 2 a.m. Unlike every other objector, I don't think I would be here if we were looking at 11:30, but this is 2 a.m. That is nightclub hours, whatever they choose to call it. And that brings with it the possibility of antisocial behaviour, which we've already seen on the beach last year. And this is not part of the town centre nightlife scene, which is already quite well policed. This is a long way along the seafront, and that could draw police resources away from the seafront. And whatever security is in place and whatever the rules about people getting in or out after normal licensing hours, 11 p.m, you can't stop people turning up and trying to get a late night drink. And I think this will be a magnet for people to turn up and be trying to get a late night drink. I simply don't think it's a suitable space for an events venue. That's not what we thought we were getting. If it has catering up till the 11 p.m, fair enough. But to run late night events there, I simply don't think is appropriate. It is close to an area which we've heard already is dangerous for swimming, and that can't be controlled by the applicants. This is not a hotel that has a deep lake that they can police and put life belts in place and barriers. That is out with the control of the applicants. So on crime and disorder, I think it's going to attract antisocial behaviour because people are going to turn up, they're going to want to get in, and I think it will simply become a magnet and a hot spot for trouble. It's near dangerous and deep water, so on public safety, I think that this is not a suitable venue. And in terms of residential amenity, I think there's a strong possibility of a noise nuisance to residents. Whatever the acoustic properties of the building, from inside the venue, you can't control what's happening outside. And I think those arriving and leaving, or those turning up trying to get in, or those who are using the space indoors but decide to go outside to get some fresh air, you cannot control the sound from any of those. And I think having late night noise from that area for residents is simply not acceptable. So on all those grounds, I feel that this application should be refused.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Does anybody from the subcommittee? Asta, you have a...
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come in at this stage just to pick up on, I think, 2 points as a matter of legal advice, which I would give openly to the committee. One relates to speakers who talked about safety issues outside of the premises, for example, public safety and customers potentially going into the sea or into the water for swimming. I just want to draw your attention to the licensing policy at paragraph 6.3. In fairness to the speakers, they have reflected this, which is that generally it's recognised that the licensing function is not to be seen as a mechanism for the general control of antisocial behaviour by individuals groups once they are beyond the direct control of the licence holder of any premises concerned. But the licensing authority's discretion may be engaged if relevant representations are made and there's an evidential link between the disturbance and the licensed venue. So reference has been made to signage, for example, as a condition, and you'll have regard to the proportionality with regards to that sort of signage. But I wanted to make clear what has been reflected in what those speakers have said as to the scope of what you can condition. This is about what is within the direct control of the licensee, and you can't really go as far as patrolling areas outside of that within limits. There is, so I just wanted to make that clear. And whilst I'm speaking about the policy, just because I believe Ms. Ashton referred to the policy at paragraph 5.6.4, so that was in relation to preservation and protection of coastal seafront areas and locations. And I think what was said is that is almost a fifth licensing objective. And I just want to be clear about that. The licensing objectives are, as you set out, they're set out within your report. They are the statutory licensing objectives. And your licensing function is with a view to promoting those. And under the Act, that is really the scope of your considerations, Chair, as you've set out for everyone today. It is right to say that in carrying out those functions, you must have regard to the national guidance, but also your licensing policy. Now, looking at paragraph 5.6.4 and what it says, it refers to experience over many years denotes that trading and licensable events have been eagerly sought along beaches and seafronts and will be significantly overprescribed if permitted to take place with the consent of the landowner. Therefore, continued preservation and protection of coastal seafront areas and locations will be an ongoing consideration under this policy. It can only be, in my advice, an ongoing consideration referable to those licensing objectives. So insofar as those points are made, they are only valid insofar as they're referable to public nuisance and perhaps crime and disorder, the disorder part of that licensing objective. And if I could give an example of that, they may be relevant, but only to the extent, for example, that there might be litter affecting coastal and seafront areas and the extent to which you might regulate that. Just finally on that, planning is a consultee on these applications. You might expect them to raise those issues if that was a concern. They've not made a representation. And that is something to which you will have to evaluate how much weight to attach. Thank you.
You're muted, Chair. First time.
Hey. Oh, I was hoping to get through the whole day without. Oh well. So, Mr. Pinmore, did you wish to respond to Councillor Davey at all? Thank you very much, Asita, for your advice, and that's really
No,
useful.
sir. You've had advice from your legal advisor. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just need to get my list of speakers. So the next speaker will be Simon Davidson of the Avenue Residents Association. Mr. Davidson, 10 minutes, 30-second warning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm speaking on behalf of the Avenues Residents Association, which covers quite a significant part of Exmouth town to the north and east of the proposed licensing premises. A considerable number of our residents live in the blocks of flats very close by Trefusis Terrace, which are places like Roswell Court and Eastern West Chepstow, and a lot of those residents have been in contact with us and have asked us to raise objections on their behalf, and maybe some of them are also representing themselves directly. But I'd like to say from the outset that in principle, Tara is not objecting in any way, of course, to the development of Sideshore or to the idea of having some licensing at these premises. The principle of the objection is to do with the extent of those licensing hours. There seems to be absolutely no rhyme or reason why, when you look at the licensing hours for Ocean or for Pavilion, why Mickey's Beach Bar should suddenly require such a long extension, especially post serving of food in their restaurant. It's also very concerning from a point of view of prevention of crime and disorder that there is already a lack of closed circuit television along the seafront. This is, it's a bit of an issue. So how people are going to track what is happening in a sort of real-time way if people leave these premises and they then start to engage in antisocial behavior or criminal behavior isn't at all clear. I mean, we hear what the legal representative of the applicant is saying, which is that they have no intent to cause massive public nuisance. Well, of course, in themselves, they aren't causing a massive public nuisance, but the people who are consuming alcohol on their premises may be the cause of that massive public nuisance. And I think that it's one thing to have in place on-site security and to try to control behavior of people on site. But let's be honest, once people leave their premises, they're washing their hands of this. It's not their legal responsibility, literally, and it won't be that, they will not attempt to influence what happens with the people once they've left their premises. They cannot. So I think, we need to view this in terms of the reality of what happens when people drink alcohol to excess, especially if they're youthful people and their inhibitions are released. There's a very good reason during the COVID crisis why pubs and restaurants and other facilities were prevented from selling alcohol for so long. It's because when those controls were released temporarily, we all saw what happened. We saw it on the TV reports. We saw it in terms of the behaviours that were exhibited. And we just know that if the only place left in town at 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the morning is this premises to go and get a late night drink, that is where people will gravitate to, possibly already having had drinks elsewhere. And it starts to put a lot of pressure on the local environment in the wider sense of the word, in terms of what happens when those people eventually then cannot get any more drinks or have been ejected because of their behaviour and start to make their way to wherever they're going next. So that was the first point, was to do with the prevention of crime and disorder. The lack of CCTV is a significant concern. The next point I want to make is to do with promotion of public safety. A number of people have said, but I would emphasise, because I'm a volunteer for the RNLI, who, as you know, have a lifeboat station just along the promenade from this facility, that where the side shore is located is one of the most dangerous points along the entire beachfront, because you are very close to the entrance to the old dock and then into the wider estuary beyond that. And we know it's a deep and it's a narrow section of water, and the tidal races through that, whether the tide is coming in or going out, are absolutely ferocious, with massive turbulence caused as the water moves in and out. I have seen personally the consequences of a swimmer losing the ability to swim even opposite the lifeboat station in an incoming tide. And they were lucky because it wasn't incoming tide, so they were being swept up the estuary towards Exmouth, not out to sea. And it still required the inshore lifeboat to be launched in daylight hours, in perfect visibility, to go and rescue that individual. It concerns me very greatly as a member of the public and as a member of the RNLI that people leaving that facility late at night, possibly quite drunk, but certainly with a lot of bravado, which is again associated with youth, could lead to people deciding it's a great idea to go for a late night swim. It's not a great idea in that location. Quite why that location was chosen as a so-called water sports centre, which it is far from being, is not clear, because that location is so dangerous. Maybe that is why only 16% of the built space of that side shore is actually given over to any form of water sport activity, and that is mainly retail activity, not actual training activity. All the rest now seems to be given over to what might be called small retail, cafes and restaurants and so on. So it's not really a water sports centre in any meaning of the word. But fundamentally, if people get themselves into trouble late at night in the sea, we know who's going to get called out. It's going to be the Coast Guard, it'll be the RNLI, it'll be the emergency services. You know, these are the people who are going to have to pick up the pieces as a result of people leaving that premises and unable to control themselves in the sea. The next point I wish to make is to do with public nuisance. You know, residential areas around that area are already affected, especially on Friday and Saturdays, by antisocial behaviour. In fact, almost any night of the week during the summer, antisocial behaviour takes place along Queen's Drive and up towards Orcombe Point, mainly in the form of people racing up and down there, whether it's in cars or on motorbikes or both. And the reality is that those people have to arrive at the seafront from somewhere, and they have to leave, obviously, to go somewhere. And there are a limited number of routes out through the town and up towards Budleigh Salterton if you're leaving the beachfront. And anybody who lives in the Avenues area or on Trefusis Terrace will be very well aware of the noise nuisance which is caused by people arriving and leaving in cars and motorbikes, which are often not properly silenced. There is already a significant public nuisance issue in that area, which is not being addressed. Quite why the police have raised no objections, I'm uncertain of, because the police at the moment are not actively policing that area and enforcing standards which are to do with noise nuisance and standards of vehicles. If they can't do that now, why would we believe that it's going to be any better when people are leaving even later at night and possibly having had even more to drink? Leaving to one side the issue of people leaving by vehicle of any description, a lot of people will leave by foot. People, when they've had a drink, have their inhibitions relaxed. They're generally in a good mood, they're enjoying themselves, but they're not quiet. They'll be shouting to each other, and they'll be doing that as they make their way back to where they live. And to do that, they have to go through the adjacent residential areas. It's perfectly obvious that there is going to be a significant noise nuisance resulting from people leaving very late at night from this area. Just because the premises closes at 2:30 doesn't mean to say that these people leave the area at 2:30. A lot of them will hang around the beachfront before they make their way home. This is going to be an extension of disturbance for local residents, which go into the very early hours of the morning. So we'd like that to taken into consideration. Sorry, I'm just checking my notes here. So I think
remaining.
Thank you. In summary, we support the development, but we do not support in any way the extension of the very long licensing hours or the potential risk of this becoming by default a 7-night-a-week effectively nightclub when it was not originally built for that purpose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Davidson. Does anybody from the subcommittee have any questions? No. Okay. Mr. Pinwell, do you have any questions in response to that?
It's just really a comment to the issues that have been raised, Chair. You've been advised by your legal advisor that our responsibilities in respect to public safety extend to the premises. We're well aware of that, and we will be employing all measures to ensure that patrons do not get drunk, because it's an offence for a licensee to serve somebody who is drunk. And we will also have doormen and procedures in place so that the premises operate as a responsible venue. Add to that the brand that the client company has. I think it should give you assurance that its other venues in the vicinity don't give rise to any issues. In relation to public nuisance and existing lack of policing and cars, again, I would respectfully suggest that's not a matter to be considered as part of this application for my client's premises. It's an existing situation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that. Our next speaker is Martin Hezloth.
I've turned my video off in the hope that the sound will be better. Can you all hear me?
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Well, I wish to speak on behalf of my wife and myself and a large number of other residents of Trefusis Terrace, which, as the committee will know, is immediately above the applicant's site. And our representations were at D70 and 71 and I177 to 179. The first point I want to make really is to echo what everybody's said so far, and that it isn't the project to which objection is taken. It's the lateness of the licensing hours applied for with the proposal that alcohol is to be served till 2 a.m. in the morning and the premises are to be open till 2:30 a.m. every day, 365 days a year. And although the suggestion has been made that they may not be open all those hours throughout the year, the reality is that if the subcommittee grants the license as is proposed, the applicant will have the right to stay open for those hours, irrespective of any other matter. It's suggested by Mr. Pinwell, well, this is just a modest increase over the licensing hours of the Ocean. We disagree. It may be modest in time, but it's highly significant in terms of the lateness of the hour and the different circumstances that apply from, say, midnight or 1 o'clock to 2:30. And as the previous speaker said, the trouble is people don't immediately disperse from the premises at 2:30. They hang around in the area. Now, may I be forgiven just to invite you to consider the law for a moment, although I accept you have a legal representative who's advising you on this. It's our view that not only must you consider the 4 licensing objectives, which we say are highly likely to be adversely impacted by these extended hours, but you also have to balance that with the effect on the local residents and their right to privacy and family life, which is guaranteed under the Human Rights Act in Article 8. And you'll see there's a reference to that proposition in the report prepared for the committee at paragraph 6.3 at page 16. Seldom, we would suggest, can there have been a licensing application that has produced so many representations against it, 78 no less, and many of those are voicing concerns on behalf of many others. So the figure is far greater than 78. And there is, we suggest, a consistent and informed theme from those representations. Firstly, there's grave concern over the excessive late night hours proposed in what is a residential area. Secondly, there's almost total disbelief at what is proposed, which is so obviously inappropriate. And thirdly, there's a real feeling of, I'm going to describe it as disappointment, that this is not what was promised as a water sports venue, but now will be a late night entertainment venue. Now, I appreciate that the last point falls outside the remit of the committee, but it needs to be said in public that the vast majority of the people in Exmouth are disappointed, at the very least, at what is now being proposed when that was not the original plan. Now, our concerns in relation to the licensing objectives and the rights to privacy in the locality for the residents, of course, it is based firstly on the likely noise environment, and that's already been dealt with by others, and the report, the acoustic report, has been criticised, and I'm not going to say any more about that. But our real concern is the real potential for a significant increase in antisocial behaviour and noise nuisance. We suggest that allowing consumption of alcohol till 2 a.m. with customers able to stay till 2:30 a.m. can only increase the real potential for antisocial behaviour and spread it to a wider area than that in which it already exists. And it can only increase the noise disturbance generated either from the premises themselves, in particular the construction and the holding of events in a marquee, or especially on persons leaving the premises in, again, I repeat, a residential area. Now, of course, Mr. Pinwell says he's no intention, his clients have no intention of causing a public nuisance, and I'm sure we accept that. But that proposition ignores the reality of the inevitable consequence of having late night entertainment venues of this kind in a residential area. It's obvious, we suggest, that all these matters impact adversely on the first 3 licensing objectives and possibly the 4th. Drinking till 2 a.m. with the ability to stay open until 2:30 has the real potential for people affected by alcohol, possibly inebriated, and in a raucous state being turned out into the quiet residential area to cause disturbance, noise, and antisocial behaviour. And that risk, which has to be recognised, could well be reduced by closing hours earlier. the solicitor, Mr. Pinwell, has repeatedly said, well, there's no actual evidence. And of course there isn't, because the premises aren't open. And indeed, more significantly, there are no other premises in the area that have such a late night licensing hours sale of alcohol and closure. So no evidence, in fact, is available. But you have to assess with respect the risk. And the risk, in our view, is absolutely obvious. The human experience shows what happens when you have a busy late night venue, as is proposed here, in a residential area. And the impact is bound to be detrimental. Of course, the applicants can't deal with this issue, but you have to be concerned, we would suggest, with the impact in relation to the rights of the residents, to the potential for antisocial behaviour and noise nuisance from leavers. So we suggest those matters are certainly contrary to the first three licensing objectives and arguably the fourth, and contrary to the respect for privacy and private family life contained in Article 8. You've been invited to dismiss the licensing hours of other premises, and we accept entirely that you have to consider this on its merits. But we make the following propositions. One, there's been no proper explanation given as to why these premises should be open so late and in excess of all the other premises in the nearby area. It's suggested that this apparently reflects modern practice, thereby doing exactly what the applicants suggest you can't do by looking at the other licensing hours. That we suggest, fundamentally, it's impossible to consider this application on its merits without the context of the licensing hours of the other premises, because you have to have regard for why the hours were granted to those other premises, what the reason was, and what impact they have had in the area before you can go on to consider what impact these extended licensing hours are going to have. Now, I'm not going to deal, as I've said, with noise in terms of the acoustic report. I found it particularly difficult to follow, and I'm glad that there's a representative who has experience in this field, and in due course we'll hear the criticism being made. But we suggest Exmouth has a reputation for a safe family resort, ideal for children, and the last thing we want to do is for this facility to change that with a nightclub, late night venue drinking, turning it into an unsafe place for children and families. So we invite you to reject the hours applied for and substitute hours which are more consistent with the licensing objectives and the right to the quiet enjoyment of the residents. That's what we say.
Thank you, Mr. Hezloth. That's yeah, thank you. So does anybody from the subcommittee have any questions for the speaker? No. Okay. Mr. Pinwell, would you like to respond to that?
Through you, Chair, just draw attention to page 179 of the agenda papers, where Mr. Hezloth makes his consideration, where he invites the committee to apply for similar hours to those of Ocean. And I've outlined Ocean's hours and you have the license, but that's the sole point I would like to make.
Okay, thank you very much. The next speaker is Ron Metcalf. Ron.
Chair, I don't know, sorry, if I can just come in here before we move on to the next.
Yeah, please do. Sorry.
It's only to respond, if I may, just briefly to the point Mr. Hezloth makes with regards to Article 8, because that is a legal point. He's rightly referred you to paragraph 6.3 of the officer report, which is on page 16, paragraph 6.3, page 16. And it's right to note that Article 8 is set out in full, which is often summarised as the right to respect for private and family life. And what Mr. Hezloth says is that that has to be balanced when you're considering the 4 licensing objectives. The officer report goes on to make just that point. It's right to note. In Licensing Act cases, this means that the subcommittee must have regard to the effect of its decisions on local residents and balance their interests against those of the public at large and the people operating the business from the premises. So I just note that Article 8, as set out, you'll see, is what's called a qualified right. It's not absolute. And it refers there to right to respect for private and family life, except in accordance with the law and as may be necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, public safety, or the economic well-being of the country, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, or protection of rights and freedoms of others. Well, we have an act here passed by Parliament, which is 2003, came into effect in 2005 after the convention was brought into effect in this country. So you might say human rights was taken into account when that act was passed. It is a qualified right, and when you look at the balance, you will have regard to the availability of conditions and also the availability of a review mechanism under the Act, whereby any other person, if a license is granted, can at any stage, with evidence, bring an application for review, stating that the licensing objectives have been undermined, and through that, you might seek to achieve the balance. The last point on that, in terms of balance, your own policy refers to how that might be struck. I'm just going to, just again, openly so everyone can hear it, refer you to page 3 of your policy, and 5 paragraphs down. The entertainment industry within the district is a major contributor to the economy of East Devon. It attracts tourists and visitors, makes for vibrant towns and communities, and is a major employer. We understand, however, our duty to ensure that the needs of residents are considered and anticipate that this policy will help to balance the sometimes conflicting needs of licensees and residents. So that's the first point. Secondly, on page 9, paragraph 3.2.4, the aim of the licensing process is to regulate licensable activities so as to promote licensing objectives. It's the licensing authority's wish to facilitate well-run and managed premises, with license holders displaying sensitivity to the impact of the premises on local residents. And then finally, page 18. So this is all to do with the balance written into the Act and through the policy. Page 18. We've got reference there to paragraph 5.3.6. It should be noted that when determining an application, the authority is making a judgment about risk. A number of speakers have referred to that. A key purpose of the licensing function is not to respond to crime, disorder, nuisance, or public harm once it's happened, but to make an informed assessment of the risk of such things occurring if a license is granted, and to take such steps as it considers appropriate to prevent or minimise such risks. My advice is that you should consider all of those paragraphs, and indeed the policy as a whole, and have regard to those when you consider the balance that needs to be struck in determining this application by reference to Article 8. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that. And that is duly noted. So returning to our list of speakers, Ron, if you'd like to speak now, Ron Metcalf.
Thank you, Chair. To ensure I don't overrun in my comments, I'll first outline my recommendations on this application and then follow on with the points that underpin them. This application is complicated and far-reaching in its licensing demands for operating Mickey's Bar and Restaurant. It asks for a lot and doesn't give more than the minimum back in its offer of conditions for operation. There are many areas in this application where conditions should be included and guardrails placed around the licensing of this premises. Like many others, I would like the subcommittee to decide on restrictions. 1, live music indoors from noon until 11 p.m. any Thursday to Saturday. 2, recorded music indoors 7 a.m. till 11 p.m. any night of the week. 3, alcohol being sold indoors from 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. Sunday to Wednesday until midnight Thursday to Saturday. 4, alcohol being sold outdoors till 11 p.m. on approval of temporary events licenses. And number 5, no late night refreshment license being approved. These are the points I would like to outline to emphasize this. Number 1, the report states that due to the number of representations, no mediation meeting was initiated between the applicants and members of the public submitting a representation. So there's been no opportunity to discuss and understand how the issues of noise will be managed, explore any compromise on extended hours, the use of the event space, and other issues. This has also disadvantaged the applicant, who has not had the opportunity to clarify any misperceptions. The decision by licensing officers to make no attempt to hold a mediation meeting based on their assumption that an agreed position would not be reached has not only prevented any dialogue, it has also removed the equality of opportunity for members of the public making representations. It has also created a flaw in this process. Number 2, if any committee member stands on site at the premises, they will see that all the windows do not face the sea, as a lawyer has stated. They will also see hundreds of properties facing the premises along the Beacon, Trefusis Terrace, Douglas Avenue, and even onto the Fox Hills area. The small open terrace on the other side of the premise and windows and doors on the back of the premises all face properties along Douglas Avenue. All of these hundreds of residents in properties directly overlooking the premises would be affected by any noise leakage or late night noise created by extended licensing hours. And because truck sound travels over empty spaces, many more residents of the streets behind would also be affected by late night noise and nuisance. While Mickey's customers will each occasionally enjoy a night out at the bar and restaurant, many hundreds of residents would be subjected every night of the year, as the application currently stands, to late night noise and nuisance until 2:30 in the morning and beyond. The Human Rights Act, mentioned by some already, states under Article 8, everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life and his home. I anticipate the subcommittee will carefully weigh up the rights of this business and its customers without overshadowing the rights of many hundreds of people nearby to their quiet enjoyment of private family life and home late at night. As well as considering human rights, the EDC policy states that the impact of the licensable activities on people living in the vicinity should not be disproportionate or unreasonable. The licensing activities in this application for extended hours, selling alcohol till 2 a.m., playing recorded music till 2 a.m., and serving late night refreshments until 1, 365 days of the year, will have an impact on many hundreds of people living in the vicinity that is both disproportionate and unreasonable. It follows, as other people have pointed out, the longer the opening hours, the more the risk of nuisance and public disorder. And while the establishment itself cannot be responsible for that, this subcommittee can be by actually limiting the risk of that public nuisance, noise, and public disorder. Also at risk of disturbance by noise and public disorder during the day as well as the night are the wild birds and other wildlife in the nearby nature reserve and the estuary, who are meant to be protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981, as well as EDC policy. The applicant states noise or vibrations from the premises will be maintained at a level that will not be audible at the facade of any neighboring noise-sensitive premises. The environmental health officer aims that the music noise level from the premises should not be audible within any noise-sensitive premises, i.e. dwellings, with their windows open for normal ventilation, especially after 11 p.m. Where is the noise management plan detailing exactly how this will be achieved? How will it be regulated and by whom? Where are the requirements for noise limiting devices, speaker conditions, noise level conditions? There are a number of conditions in the EDDC pool of licensing conditions contained within their Licensing Act policy that could and should be mobilized by the subcommittee to explicitly ensure this aim becomes a reality. And how does the environmental health officer's solution square with COVID requirements for ventilation? Where is the package of measures for departing customers to ensure patrons are not noisy nor disturbing neighborhoods on journeys home using taxi services that won't sound horns on collection of customers, etc.? On the use of, number 4, on the use of bottles outdoor, the officer report states the conditions requested by the police include the use of polycarbonate glasses and no bottles in outside event space. And these have been said to be agreed with the applicant. Appendix F, however, from the applicant contradicts this by stating, quote, except for the sale of a bottle of wine / champagne, no bottles containing beverages will be given, and so on and so forth, end of quote, clearly stating their intention to use wine and champagne bottles in the outside event space. Will the subcommittee accept the applicant's intention to supply bottles outdoors or prohibit this as requested by the police? There are no details in the application for patrolling or monitoring of the surrounding areas to oversee behavior and littering, nor are there any details of any facilities for patrons to dispose of the proposed polycarbonate beverage glasses. If these are not disposed of properly for recycling, they severely affect marine life when dumped into the ocean. Number 5, there is no clear and explicit statement of zero tolerance of drugs on the premises. This is a known problem in the area. Number 6, late night refreshments. EDDC policy quotes central government information, and they say they believe it is necessary to protect local and I'm quoting, necessary to protect local residents because premises which serve late night refreshment can be used by customers who may have been drinking at other premises earlier in the evening, thereby creating the potential for disorder on and near the premises. Also because large numbers of customers may gather at places serving late night refreshments, there is a potential for nuisance and disturbance for local residents. I point out to the subcommittee that those are central government's words, and that adding the grant of a late night refreshment license here to this premises would again be increasing the risk of public disorder and crime. Number 7, if it's not the intention of the applicant to sell alcohol in the outdoor event space every day from 9 to 11:30, why is the applicant requesting a license that covers 13 hours of every day of the week from April to October? If the stated intention is to operate for specific events, then why is the applicant not applying for a temporary events license each time? That is what TENs are for. An unfettered permission for use every day of the week and playing music effectively and potentially changes the use of this space into an extension or annex of Mickey's Bar and Restaurant. This will potentially cause more noise and nuisance in the nearby community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Metcalf. Does anybody from the committee have any questions relating to that? Mr. Pinwell, do you have any questions for
no,
Mr. Metcalf? No. Okay, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Mr. Peter Tweedy.
Hello.
Hi there.
I'd like to thank you but my points have already been made by other people, and quite well, I might add. So I don't have anything to say at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. So now our next registered speaker is Robert Tweedy.
Hello, thank you. I would like to express my disappointment that the Environmental Health Officer is not present to answer why there has been a 5 dB increase in volume above background noise level during the day, a change from the initial application. On the acoustic report, we can see that the majority of current daytime noise is actually birdsong, which you can see starting as the sun rises on pages 9 through 12 of the Environmental Sound Survey. Birdsong is a joy to listen to, unlike the noise nuisance that would be coming from Mickey's continuously. Thank you. That's the end of my statement.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from the committee, any questions? No, or Mr. Pinwell, do you have any questions in regards to that?
No, Chair.
Okay, next speaker is Michelle Ward.
Thank you. Again, like previous speakers, don't have too much to add to what's already been said so well by many of the participants this afternoon or this morning. I would like to just put in a couple of points, just to reiterate about the no intent to cause public nuisance. Well, long licensing hours, by the very nature of them, will do that. And one question I've had in my mind is, what clientele do Mickeys expect taking light refreshment from 11 till 1 in the morning and drinking until 2 in their normal everyday business? What is their aims for having that extra time to serve people? Who are they expecting to come? Can I just make a general point and say, I think it's unlikely that the normal sort of population of Exmouth would be turning out at that time to have a snack and to eat. We're expecting a high-class restaurant. It wasn't probably in our minds to even have those sort of licensing hours. And I see no reason why they should want to, apart from making extra money, until late night. When the dangers of late night drinking and people coming from other parts of Exmouth who have been drinking elsewhere, knowing this is probably the only late night venue that they could get into to drink further. And those dangers that in the public safety, public nuisance, all of those. So I would just put that forward as a general thing. I've had another thought about the marquee. Its permanent erection, was that planning, part of planning? Again, something we were not expecting. And so an extension of that business even further, perhaps, than we all expected. Is it just a means of licensing simplification on their part, where they don't need to apply for special late night licenses for specific events? Well, fine, but it leaves it open to those dangers being there every day. And one last thing about the bottles being taken or being sold outside. What is to stop people coming, sitting at a table or in the event space, if it's open to the public at some point and not a specific event? What is to stop people ordering several bottles of wine, sitting for half an hour, and then removing those bottles with the plastic containers to the beach, to the Mare, and other places? This needs to be looked at. I was really surprised that the police did not have any representation here, but we all know that the police coverage and of the seafront is not all that we would hope it to be. And maybe they did not think it was going to cause a particular problem. And I hope very much, I'm looking forward myself to going to Mickey's to eat and to partake in the patisserie and to sit at a table outside and enjoy the sunshine. But I'm not looking forward to potential problems. And I hope the committee would consider those very seriously on behalf of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody from the committee have anything they wish to respond with to that? No. Mr. Finwell?
No, nothing from me, Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Our next speaker is Martin Warren.
Thank you, Chair. I'll switch off my video just to improve the sound quality.
Okay, that's great. We can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay, thank you. And thanks for your time this morning, those of your subcommittee. I'm speaking this morning in my capacity as chair of the Rocklands Resident Management Company. Part of Trefusis Terrace, we overlook this. As some of the other speakers on Trefusis Terrace has said, we can see the centre all times of the day. I think it's fair to start by saying we'd be generally supportive of the venture, and I would certainly wish Michael Dart, Michael Keynes and others involved all the very best with it. It's nice to see investment in Exmouth. We're not against it in principle. However, the application in its current form fails to meet at least 3 out of the 4 licensing objectives, and as others have said, I think it fails to balance the residents' reasonable rights to enjoy enjoyment of their property with the commercial needs of the venture. They clearly need to sell food and alcohol to make money, and there's a balance to be struck. But in our view, the balance is tilted way too far in favour of the Mickey's and not sufficient, giving local residents sufficient consideration. Looking firstly then at the objectives, the licensing objectives, the prevention of crime and disorder. A lot has been said about this, and the application talks of effectively bouncers and CCTV to control access to the premises. However, the large event space, that big chunk of triangular ground, which is within the will be licensed premises, it just it's about control. There's no detail about how it will be controlled. If the marquee is there for 6 months a year and the area is unfenced, as we assume it is going to be, how is that going to be controlled? Particularly as alcohol will be served there until late. Secondly, there is no control of the behaviour of those leaving the premises at late hours. Most people will come to these premises they will struggle to leave the premises rather by driving for obvious reasons. The increase in noise and the increase in general poor behaviour is obvious. Secondly, public safety. This is a large centre. If you look at the maths, there will be 252 people sitting at the 2 restaurants. Then presumably there'll be people standing at the bar. Then there's the event space. We don't know how big this marquee is going to be, but let's say that's 100 plus. So we're talking about 500 people very, very late at night. So the public safety issues are obvious. Those before me have talked very eloquently around the nature reserve, the dangers with the River Ex at this point. And those dangers are manifest if drinking is allowed until 2 a.m. Thirdly, prevention of public nuisance. We talked a lot about it. We haven't that much said what it is, and I'm conscious that you have your own advisor, but there's a very good definition in a Law Commission paper 358 of 2015 that summarises public nuisance and of course the need to prevent public nuisance as acts or omissions which endanger the life, health, property or comfort of the public. And again here, there is no control of people leaving. There can't be. People will leave having consumed large amounts of alcohol. The reality is you don't go to a premises until 2 o'clock to consume 1 or 2 drinks. You go there to consume a lot of alcohol. So no control of people leaving, no control of the noise those people make. And as those people disperse and walk through this quiet residential area, no control. And us, the residents, will have to put up with this each day of the year. And again, I would emphasize no control of the event space. This is a space which will be let out for a variety of functions. We have no detail. And given the size of the space with a marquee on it, there can be no meaningful control. So we would say this application fails to meet 3 of the 4 criteria. And I would draw the committee's attention to para 1.5 of the statutory guidance, the government guidance, which has been alluded to, which talks of protecting the public and local residents from crime, antisocial behaviour and noise nuisance caused, and I emphasise the word caused, by licensed premises. So I don't think it is open to the applicants to say it's nothing to do with us, because if they are causing this nuisance by applying people with alcohol until 2 o'clock in the morning. So in summary, we would say that the ambit of this application is excessive, and what needs to happen is the hours should be reduced. The hours that the event space will operate until, music until 11 and last orders at 11 and vacate by midnight, would be a very sensible proposition in our view for the entire operation, all reference to the ocean hours. But given they have applied for the event space for these hours, you could just copy those hours across. My last point would be, and I think Martin alluded to this, if this application is granted in its current form, it will create a precedent that others in Exmouth can apply for a license to sell alcohol until 2 in the morning. So if I am running Ocean, I'm not, if I'm running Ocean and I'm seeing my customer walk down the road when I close, why wouldn't I apply to this subcommittee to extend my hours until 2 a.m. as well? And again, if that happens, and each application being considered on its own merits, the reality would be further late night drinking, potential that causes. So with 77 objections representing a lot more people than that, and given the size of this operation, circa 500 people, we would urge the committee to err on the side of caution and these levels and control the drinking with a circa 11 p.m. cutoff. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody from the committee have any questions in regards to that? Mr. Pinwell, do you have any?
Nothing, Chair.
Okay. At this point, I would like to use my discretion to, if we could speak to somebody from Environmental Health, Alice. I believe maybe the committee may have 1 or 2 questions with regards to, is Alice here?
She is here, Chair. She's muted, I think.
Okay. Councillor Block. Brilliant. Yeah, we can now. That's great. Yeah, not a problem at all. Councillor Bloxham, you have a question for Alice.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Chair. Alice, I'm just reading the papers and the conditions that you've mentioned. It's not quite clear to me whether you've confirmed that you've reached agreement with the applicant regarding the conditions that you're recommending should the application be granted. Could you just confirm that you have reached agreement, please?
Yes, we have. I believe that was confirmed by Gareth Kinwell. So yes, it has.
It has. Thank you very much. And just one other question, and it's quite a broad one, really. As some people have said, not everybody is an expert on the noise, and noise is obviously creating quite an issue for people. Is there any way that in layman's terms, you can give us an indication of what level of noise would be expected by the local residents?
Yes, so for the regulated entertainment, this is what it applies to. So after 2300 hours, so after 11 p.m, there should not be any noise from music. Established. That was the
Alice, I lost you there. I don't know if everybody else did, so I didn't get your answer.
Yes.
Yeah, can you just repeat the last couple of sentences? Thanks.
Sorry, yes. So the after 2300 hours, which is the night time, there should not be any noise over the existing noise levels, which are currently as it is. So that's why they've already done the background levels. That's already been established by the noise consultant. So after 2300 hours, there should not be any noise emitted from the premises from music after 2300 hours. And before that, we're saying we're allowing an increase of 5 decibels before 2300 hours on regulated entertainment. Does that make sense?
Is that 5 decibels at the measurement points for the noise?
It is, yeah. So it's at the facades of the nearest residential properties.
Okay.
So yeah, it's more stringent after 2300 hours. So basically saying no additional noise from music after that time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bloxham. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you. Alice, I've got a couple of questions here. You've done the sound inside the building, which is obviously without customers that are out on the terrace and inside. What happens if the outside marquee has got a wedding and has live music, and then you've got the inside as well? Have you taken this into account?
So basically, we set the levels at the residential facades. So it's up to the licensed premises, the applicant, using his noise consultant to ensure that those levels are not exceeded at those residential facades. So they would need to take into account, the inside noise levels and the outside noise levels.
Okay, and what about biodegradable glasses?
Say that again.
Biodegradable glasses for drinking outside. The plastic that can be degradable. I know they're more expensive, but you can get them, can't you?
I can't really comment on that aspect because our emphasis is on the noise element from music.
Okay, so you're only doing music. Okay, right.
Okay.
Thank you, Alice.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just trying to think if I have any particular questions at this point. I don't. Can I just clarify actually? In terms of what we're discussing here, and in terms of what you are recommending is okay, and what has been tested for previously. I've read in the sound report that things like bass levels and all of that have been looked at within the building. When it comes to the tent or the marquee, that's something which is included in all of this, even though the tests that you've witnessed have been just with the indoor sound system in the building. There's an assumption that what happens in the marquee will still meet these requirements.
So what would have to happen at the mixer or at the DJ booth or where the live music's taking place, any noise emanating must not exceed the levels that we are asking at the residential facades of the nearest residential properties. Right. So it would be up to the operator or the applicant to ensure that those levels at such a level that it's not going to be above the levels that we require at the nearest residential facades. So it would be up to them to manage that. The marquee won't offer any acoustic, it doesn't offer any barrier, but they still have to account for that in the levels that they set, that's being played at the premises.
Okay, so in terms of that, if that was something that residents or people at that barrier didn't feel was being adhered to, they're perfectly within their rights to point that out, aren't they, to the relevant authorities and make that point.
Yeah, so if they're experiencing excessive intrusive noise during the daytime and particularly at night time, because what we're saying at night time is that the noise from the premises should not be above the ambient levels, so it shouldn't be intrusive, particularly at night time. Then they can contact us and we'll investigate. But yeah, it's up to the operator to ensure that those levels are not being exceeded.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you very much. I will go to Asta now, just who wants to say something, and also just to confirm, it's okay for other interested parties to have a quick word with Alice, I think, isn't it? So long as they're questions rather than representations.
Yes, Chair. Questions should only come through you. I think, if I may, can I just raise my questions of clarification after interested parties have asked their questions at the end?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, so if we can keep it to questions, interested parties, that's fine. Ron Metcalf, would you like to speak to Alice?
Sorry, I was muted. Actually, I prefer to allow Robert Tweedy, who has far more expertise than I do, to ask his questions first. They may cover what I'm interested in.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Tweedy?
Hello. Thank you. The Chair, I would like to ask why there has been a change to the initial application with regards to an extra 5 dB during the day, because at the moment we listen to birdsong and not noise pollution. Thank you.
Alice?
Is that directed to myself?
I think so, yeah.
I don't think that.
I was told by the legal advisor that it has to go via the Chair, so I thought I'd address the Chair.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Alice, would you like to respond to that?
Okay, so you're saying that I don't think there has been an increase. We, in our initial responses, I think we said for live music must not exceed background by more than 15 dB, and we've actually made it more stringent by saying that it should not be anything more than 5 dB. So we've actually made it more stringent, since our initial response. So I don't know. I'm not sure what you're referring to. Sorry.
I'm referring to on the license application under license objectives, and I quote, noise or vibration from the premises will be maintained at a level that will not be audible at the facade or any neighbouring noise sensitive premises, end quote. And that has now changed to plus 5 dB, which is in contrary to the license application.
Okay, so that's something that the applicants put forward. Well, we put forward our conditions and we believe that our conditions are reasonable. So that is what our conditions are. That's what the applicants put forward.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to echo the point that there is no control measures for any outside space.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tweedy. David Buller.
Yeah, sorry, a question for Alice. Has the need to consider light pollution from the quays, particularly if it's operating for 20 hours over the day? Is that, I'm concerned about the impact of light pollution on the local environment in terms of the wildlife on the nature reserve, which has protected species, and also wildfowl that are overwintering on the estuary. So is that an issue that should be or has been considered?
I would suggest that light pollution is considered when the planning application is heard. And I know there have been some applications since the building commenced work with regards to signage. So I wouldn't imagine that it's environmental health thing. But Alice, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, hi. No, it hasn't been considered under the licensing regime. previously said, that it would probably be something that would have been picked up at planning. So no, I haven't.
So does that mean are measures being taken to limit light pollution from Mickeys, or is it just being ignored?
No, I believe that when the planning committee accepted the application to build it, that that light spill measures and things like that, they were satisfied with what had been done in terms of where windows are, where blinds are inside, and things such as that. So although it's not something that we're considering today, it has been, I believe, taken into account when the building was constructed. And that would be a question for the planning authorities afterwards, if you find that it's not adhering to what they constructed. Okay, Ron, you still have a question, Ron Metcalf. You still got your hand up. Do you wish to ask?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
No worries.
It was partially answered in a previous question from Robert Tweedy, but I'm back to the applicant actually stating noise or vibrations from the premises will be maintained at a level that will not be audible at the facade of any, etc. And as I understood the response from Alice, she was satisfied with 5 decibels, which is more noise. And my question on that is, well, why not actually work with the level that the applicant put forward? Why actually a more relaxed set of conditions? I don't understand the logic of that. If the applicant says we're going to do this, then why would you settle for something that is actually less stringent? Because that obviously disadvantages everybody who's going to have to listen to the 5 decibels.
Hi, yeah,
Alice.
I mean, that 5 dB has come about from standards that is widely accepted. So it is generally accepted that premises can reasonably emit some level of sound during the daytime. So that is something that we feel is reasonable. Now, that's what we've put forward. I suppose maybe someone else can answer this, as if the committee feel that it's necessary that the condition needs to be made more stringent, so that there is no noise above the existing level. Then is that maybe someone else can answer that for me, whether that is a possibility. I don't, it would be possible to set a level so so the noise does not go over the existing levels, but I suppose it's for the committee to decide whether that's reasonable, because we feel that the conditions we've put forward are reasonable.
Okay, Chair, if
go for it, Ron.
If I may come back, I suppose my question still stands. If an applicant puts forward something to a standard, then why wouldn't you actually set a condition that requires them to actually meet that? I can hear that there are other standards which might be, judged to be acceptable, but nonetheless, if the applicants put forward something, why wouldn't the committee actually make a condition? It's obviously to the benefit of everybody who's going to have to listen to noise, which might be seen as acceptable or not by the industry standard. So that's one question. My second question is that the testing, as I understood, was done without any windows being open in the premises. And later on somewhere, and I'm sorry I can't lay my hands on it just at the moment, there is information that says that they plan to operate now with 2 windows open. So obviously that isn't going to be to the same standard. Actually, it's just been found for me. Yes, there's something about it's come up in Ashford's Appendix H, So my question is, if the test was done with the windows closed and things have moved on to allowing windows to be open, doesn't that undermine the basis of the testing that was done and the standard that was set?
Alice, are you able to respond to that?
Now, regardless of whether they have the windows opened or closed, they still have to meet the condition at the nearest residential properties. So, as I said previously, it's up to them to manage that. So if they've got
Alice,
they have to mute them down. So for me, that is so great. So yes.
You're breaking up. I think we caught the first part of that, which was regardless of whether or not the windows are open or closed, the conditions still have to be met at the measuring point of the nearest residential property.
Yeah, that's correct. So it still has to be managed in a way that the levels aren't going to be excessive for those residential properties. So if the windows are open, it might mean that the levels being played are reduced, so the noise transmission isn't so great. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
Yeah, I was going to say, I will leave again the question for the subcommittee to consider. How is all of that going to actually be monitored, by whom, and are there sufficient conditions put in place to I mean, if they're going to change the volume, who's going to keep track of all of that, and how is that going to be? Is the subcommittee going to leave us having to be constantly monitoring and complaining to licensing about the level of noise? And are you relying on that as being the monitoring? End of questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Metcalf. Okay, next question. We'll just take these two questions and then we'll hear from Asita, and then we will take a short break. Jane Ashton, you have a question, and then Simon Davidson. Okay, so yeah, Jane.
Yes, Councillor Chapman asked a question from Alice. What about biodegradable drinking vessels? Now, maybe I misunderstood Alice's response, but it suggested that that was not her remit to answer. So, because the reusable polycarbonate drinking vessels that are being proposed are not biodegradable, please could you ask Alice whom we must address this question to?
I'm not entirely sure we need to ask Alice, or we can ask everybody. Where should we be directing that question? Do you think which department?
Well, it's environmental health. It damages the environment. They do not biodegrade. There is no such thing as biodegradable plastic, and even the manufacturers have admitted it. They leach particles into the environment. So I want to know, if that's the intention to use those, who must we make this objection to if the environmental health are not considering that important?
Okay, well, it's something that we will note and we will use in our in our deliberations later. But in terms of taking that further within the council, does any of the officers have any idea where that should be directed? If it's not environmental health.
Chair, it may be something for Steve Saunders, if he's still on the call, might have an idea. The licensing manager may be able to point us in the right direction.
Steve, are you still with us?
Yes, Chair, if I may.
Yeah, please do.
The issue of polycarbonate drinking vessels is within the pool of conditions. It's under point 32 of the licensing policy, and which addresses polycarbonate as an alternative to glass. It's very often a requirement or a condition that the police would raise, because the police feel that straightforward glass utensils can present a risk in certain locations and certain premises. So to draw your attention to the wording of polycarbonate, that does sit within the pool of conditions within the licensing policy, Chair.
Okay, so it's something that's enshrined within the licensing policy, and it is something that that is expected by the police, etc. Jane, do you have a?
I do have a response. It's a response of some sort of alarm, in as much as I think there are going to be a lot of people who want Exmouth to be an eco resort, and here we will have a large, well thought of applicant putting forward has put forward a proposal for something which many environmental people will know is completely the wrong thing to be doing, and there will be repercussions on this. It's damaging the future for our children. But thank you. I can see you can't help me on that.
Okay,
Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your question, and it is something that we will consider when we deliberate. Ms. Simon Davidson, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, Chair. Thank you. It's two very quick questions. The first one for the EHO is, as ambient noise levels have already been mentioned at the facade of the nearest residential properties, will it be possible, please, to publish a table of these noise levels for residents to refer to? Because at the moment, none of us would have the slightest idea what this would amount to. Secondly, related to that, the maximum percentage increase being proposed by EHO is plus 5 decibels. To most of us, a decibel is just some completely meaningless unit of sound. And, you know, given the measurements that have been taken, if we were to take a benchmark of 11 o'clock at night, what percentage increase in sound volume does 5 decibels represent?
Alice?
Hi, yeah. Sorry, my mind's gone blank. Could you give me the first question? It was regarding the levels, wasn't it? So you wanted some information regarding the background levels. So that's within
I think what I was asking for is I was asking for a table of noise levels, of existing ambient noise levels throughout the 24-hour period across the week to be published, so that residents have those to hand, because otherwise there is absolutely no means of residents judging whether the noise resulting from this premises exceeds ambient by whatever level. That was the first point.
Yeah. So within the report that was sent out to you, there's the noise report embedded within it. That is that includes the data, which includes the ambient levels for the daytime and nighttime. And that corresponds to the recording period, which was done, I think, it was done by the noise consultant in March, end of March time. So that includes the levels there. And we're taking background daytime level as 52 and background nighttime level as 43. And that was following this report. So yeah, and then in with regard to your second point about decibel levels, I think you said after 2300 hours, after 11 p.m, there shouldn't be any additional noise after 11 p.m. as per our conditions.
No, what I was actually asking was if we were to take actually your background noise level of 43 decibels for nighttime,
Yeah.
what percentage increase does 5 decibels represent over 43? I mean, I know it's a logarithmic scale, but how much more noise is that?
I don't think I know if I can give that to you right now. 3 dB is generally noticeable, but obviously those levels are going to be at the facade, so you have to take into account, you know, any front gardens, any driveways, etc. And also an openable window will allow for a reduction in 15 dB. So I know that doesn't directly answer your question, but maybe that gives you a bit more information.
Well, I think what it shows is thank you for your reply, but I think it shows that there is a lack of information which is going to be readily accessible for residents and the public in order for them to judge the impact of this. Because if 3 + 3 decibels is recognized as a significant increase in noise level, and as decibels operates on a logarithmic scale, then even an increase of 2 decibels doesn't sound much, but it must be actually quite a lot more. And this is the issue. How do residents and the public judge the potential impact of noise emanating from these premises? We can't. We're lay people. And I know that within the report that you sent out, it contains these details. The vast majority of residents have not read that report and will not be able to access that report. What they probably need, please, is something which is to hand and is almost like a ready reference for them. I think it would just help people.
So I already said this, but after 11, there should be nothing additional, no noise affecting residents from the premises after 11 p.m. Before then, as I said, we're allowing a 5 dB, and that's for regulated entertainment. Now, if residents are being unreasonably affected, then you've got the channels of contacting environmental health, and we will investigate. We've got our own noise monitoring equipment, and the benefit of the levels being set at the facade is that we can also independently monitor it using our own noise equipment to determine whether the levels are being adhered to. And in addition to that, we've also got powers under Environmental Protection Act, so which is slightly separate to the licensing regime. So if we, you know, in addition, feel that the levels are totally unreasonable, then we've also got the ability to serve a notice under the Environmental Protection Act. But you know, there is emphasis that the licensed premises should be adhering to the conditions that we set. You know, it's up to them to comply with that. But you know, as I previously said, you know, if you feel that you're being unreasonably affected, then you can go down the road of contacting environmental health.
But perhaps what's required here, in fact, is if the operator of the premises is responsible for controlling the sound levels within the limits set, then equally there should be some obligation on them to be measuring those sound levels at the facades of the nearest premises to make sure that's happening. And it's not clear that that will be the case.
I expect it would be. I
think I thank you, Mr. Davidson, for your question. I think in terms of that, and also in light of what Mr. Metcalf said about sort of interested parties having to police this themselves, in effect, which I don't think is necessarily a reasonable thing for them to have to do. It is difficult, I imagine, for the venue, which is at the bottom of the hill, effectively, to be able to judge what the noise is at the top of the hill. Is there any scope for them having some sort of, or it's just a general question really, is there anything available, any product available whereby they could measure the sound at the top of the hill while they're making noise at the bottom of it? I don't know if that's something that exists.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible to do that. They've got noise monitoring equipment, so they can certainly play the music and then set the levels so that it's not above the levels that we require.
Okay.
That's how they'll do it.
But they'll be able to see what the noise is at the top of the hill from the bottom of the hill. But almost have a set.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah, I would. Okay, Robert Tweedy, we'll have one more question from you, and then we will hear from our legal advisor before we take a short break.
Thank you very much. So the question is that well, I've got two sort of statements to go with it. Alice has said that it's up to the committee to decide whether what the environmental health has said, or whether you go by the actual application form from the applicant of no increase in volume across background level during the day. I'd also like to point out that not only will the noise emanating from the building be louder than the background level, it'll also be a change to the current noise. It'll be like changing the music. We're listening to birdsong, that will be replaced by even louder noise and music from a venue. So it would be intrusive on two levels, the volume and the change of sound. Now, strangely enough, in the report, they've said road and car park, road and there's a play park nearby, but I've got video footage of the thing, and you can hear in the background it is birdsong, and I can walk out my balcony and show you the place where they put the microphone, and we can all listen to the birdsong, not the noise emanating from the building.
Mr. Tweedy, I do have to ask, do you have a question?
I was trying to formulate that into a question, so it's just, can we leave that with the committee to decide whether you go by the applicants saying no louder, or whether you go to the environmental health of 5 dB.
Okay, thank you. I see Daphne has a hand up. Daphne, do you have a question? Daphne Currier. You're muted still, Daphne.
Sorry.
There we go.
Just briefly, are the applicants and the licensing authority obliged to anticipate risk to life when granting extended hours? Who would be liable if there was a drowning?
Okay, thank you. It's a good question. That's a really good question, and that's something which I guess our legal advisor may be able to help us with. And then if he could make his any points that he feels necessary, he needs to. So on that first question, if you can,
yeah,
throw that at you.
I think the question is who would be liable if there's a drowning, I think. And I think the position is, I mean, it's just to take a step back, we're dealing with licensing, referable to the licensing objectives. We can condition by reference to what the guidance and the policy says as to what is in the direct responsibility of the licensee. The reason why the guidance says that is because there's a balance to be struck once people leave the direct responsibility of a licensee as to individual responsibility. It's their decision, it might be said, to enter the water and to do what they do. And so I'm not going to be heard on record to say who's liable at all, because it's not really, I think, a function of this committee to address that particular question. Of course, the committee should hear what is said, attach such weight as they should see fit, and consider those questions. But it's always within the scope of what licensing can do, which is referable to those licensing objectives and the conditions. So there's lots of other legislation that will cover who is liable for incidents which occur within the council's district or area. But I don't. That's not something I have at my fingertips. But it's right to say the prevention of public safety. Sorry, public safety is a licensing objective, and you must seek to promote that. But then it becomes a question of what you can do within licensing, which is those matters I've already outlined. So that's just the answer, my legal advice on that first point. Can I then, I'm sorry, it's been a sort of a helpful discussion though on environmental health matters, but I just want to, my questions through you, Chair, are only to clarify a few points, if I may. Gil, I think you're still with us. I just want to check this. The conditions which you seek are on page 141, 141 of the bundle. I believe that's the final position, and it's your email from Environmental Health on the 7th of April 2021, and that's the 3 different time periods and the conditions set. Is that right?
Through you, Chair.
Yeah.
From the applicant's point of view, yes, I can confirm that.
Okay. I just wanted confirmation, if I can get it from Miss Gill, that that's her position.
Can you confirm?
Alice, are you still with us?
Please, could you confirm the page number? Then I can
Yes, it's page 141, 141, Appendix G3, and it's contained in an email from you to, I think it's Leslie Barber.
Yeah, that's correct. Those are the final conditions, yes.
I'm grateful. And I'll just clarify with you, there's a last paragraph there that is as to how the conditions might be complied with by using a noise consultant. That would not ordinarily form part of a condition. It would be an expectation from the Environmental Health Department. And obviously you've had some discussion with a noise consultant at this stage. So I'm just clarifying with you that the last paragraph, to comply with these conditions, is not something that would ordinarily form part of a condition. Do you have any comment on that?
No comment.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's fine. I think you asked a question. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. And then just to cover this as well, you say that those are the conditions which the Environmental Health Department consider are reasonable. And just to note and take into account, I think what Mr. Tweedy has said as to a change in the character of the noise. Environmental Health Department's view is that those are reasonable conditions to seek, such that the prevention of public nuisance as a licensing objective will be upheld. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm grateful. Okay, and then just a couple of other points, if I may. The monitoring locations that were agreed upon. If you've got the bundle, it's page 140. Page 140, I think there was an original suggestion of 3 monitoring locations. But as I understand it, what we have agreed upon is a single monitoring location, which is representative of all of them. Is that right?
So the one monitoring location in the public gardens, that was to establish background over that period in March.
Yep.
Now, if they are those 3 monitoring points still stands, and we still that the noise levels do not exceed those levels when music is played at the premises. So when the premises is in operation, we would expect that the levels monitored at those 3 points do not exceed the levels that we request. Does that make sense?
Thank you, that's helpful. Yeah. So just to be clear, the conditions that you're seeking on page 141 refer to the agreed monitoring points. The agreed monitoring points are those on page 140, and it's 3 of them. Is that right?
That's correct, for when the premises is in operation.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful on that. Then just to cover this point on windows, can you just help me on this? And it's again for clarification. what Ashford's have said at page 150, page 150, is that it's not considered that there's a need to enforce that all window apertures in the area are closed. The company is prepared to ensure that from 2300 hours, the only apertures open in the building will be the windows which front directly onto the seafront. This scenario is being considered in the acoustics report. That's page 150 in the red box. If you then look at page 157, page 157, when I look at paragraphs 4.2 and 4.3, what I see there is that there was discussion of the internal sound system and operation of the retractable terrace windows and roof system, and how these would be closed at 2300, with the exception of 2 windows facing the sea. So that's the reference I think Ashford's are making. And then it goes on to say the internal sound system volume was increased to the loudest preset level, external walk, with the terrace windows and roof closed. So I think just firstly, that's where it is said that the windows being closed is considered. Is that your understanding or not?
Sorry, could you?
So what I'm saying is that the Ashford's letter says that not all of the windows being closed is something that has been considered in the acoustics report. I think I'm looking in the right place, which is 4.2 and 4.3. Is that right? That's where they talk about there will be 2 windows that will be open that face the sea.
Yeah, so obviously if it's just the windows facing the sea, that will reduce any noise affecting residents. But
so, yeah, and then your overriding point, if I can say this, girl, is that what has been set in terms of conditions is noise levels at the agreed monitoring locations. So whatever happens on the site, whether it's inside, outside, in marquees, or wherever, they have to comply with the conditions which set the levels.
Exactly. So emphasis is on residents. It's on the levels at the facades of the nearest residential properties. So it's up to the operator, and the operator might use the noise consultant to ensure that any levels, coming out of the premises is not going to be affecting residents within their properties.
All right, thank you. And then the final point is just to clarify this. There is in the operating schedule at page 32 of the agenda what I think Mr. Tweedy and Mr. Metcalf have referred to, which is noise or vibration from the premises will be maintained at a level that will not be audible at the facade of any neighbouring noise-sensitive premises. You've confirmed that the conditions that you're seeking are those that are in, I think, page 141. But I just want to get your view on this. On page 65 of the council's licensing policy, right at the top, it says, and you may be familiar with this, inaudibility conditions. So that reference to the application refers to levels that will not be audible. The policy says inaudibility conditions have been popular in the past, but have faced sufficient criticism in the courts to be quashed as invalid for lack of precision. Noise conditions are notoriously difficult to preempt and should be applied only where professional advice has been obtained from, in that case, North Devon's Council Environmental Protection Team. Such conditions will be strictly tailored. That's really a legal matter, but it is saying that inaudibility conditions have faced criticism for being imprecise and invalid for lack of precision. So my understanding is taking that into account, you have had mediation with Ashford's and with the noise consultant and arrived at the conditions which you're seeking, which is on page 141. Can you just confirm, is that the position from environmental health? You're not seeking an inaudibility condition as
No, so the yeah, after 2300 hours, we're saying it should not, the level should not be above background. So and that is protecting residents within their properties during sleeping hours. And daytime, we're saying 5 dB above background or above ambient.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify then to the committee, my legal advice is as per page 65 of the licensing policy, which refers to concerns about inaudibility conditions. So the condition which the applicant originally was, I think, referencing in their schedule about not being audible at the facade of any noise neighbouring noise sensitive premises raises concerns about what is inaudibility and what is a neighbouring noise sensitive premises. And that is taking that into account, what Environmental Health have done is they've come up with conditions which are consistent with the model conditions tailored to these premises and the background noise conditions, that the noise effects that have been assessed. So I think that is why Environmental Health have approached and arrived at their 3 conditions, really, which are on page 141. And my legal advice would be that there would be real concerns with imposing a condition as per page 32 within the box under the prevention of public nuisance on inaudibility, for the reasons set out at the top of page 65 about the concerns with those types of conditions. I hope that's clear. It's a little bit knotty, it always is with noise, but that's my legal advice.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, we will take a half an hour break. And after we come back, I will be asking if there's anybody who hasn't spoken, any interested party who I haven't asked to speak, if there's anybody else who would like to. Bearing in mind the fact we have heard quite a lot of the relevant points, but if anybody feels they have anything different they wish to ask, then that will be your opportunity. Okay, so if we return at 1:30, and if everybody can just make sure that they're muted,